I often say that 90% of the stretch marks on my heart and my mind are due to the words of bell hooks. I've read every book, watched every interview. I think I've read every book 4 or 5 times, but nothing changed my life like this book, Teaching to Transgress. As a first-year doctoral student, I was given the opportunity to teach a master's in social work course, and I teaching at the most ethnically and racially diverse research institute in the United States at the time. And I remember thinking, I can't lose control of this classroom. I've got to keep control of this classroom. I can't lose control of myself, be authoritative. I was feeling so insecure, and I just consumed, inhaled this book, thank God, on week 2. And this paragraph, I come back to this paragraph all the time because I still consider myself above all else a teacher. When education is the practice of freedom, education is the practice of freedom. Whew. Students are not the only ones who are asked to share, to confess. Engaged pedagogy does not seek simply to empower students. Any classroom that employs a holistic model of learning will also be a place where the teacher grows and are empowered by the process. That empowerment cannot happen if we refuse to be vulnerable while encouraging students to take risks. Changed everything. I lost control. I lost total control, and gained complete trust. That semester, that first semester of teaching, I slept with this next on my nightstand, but this way, picture side up. So when I rolled out of bed in the morning, the first thing I saw was bell hooks' face, and I just said, I'm not going to make it safe for me. I'm going to make it safe for liberation. And I still try to do that. And I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have the career I have. And I wouldn't be able to bring my work to the world without her.
In my social justice work and in the arts, there is not a year that doesn't go by without a young woman or girl telling me that bell hooks changed their lives. And it brings me such joy because she changed my life too. Bell gave me a language to name the why, what, and how of the constant barrage of domination and oppression aimed at us by the white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal world. Just like now, future generations will be in awe of the truth and wisdom and clarity of her words. Bell has always been with me, before and after her passing. She will live in my heart as a friend, mentor, sister woman, laughing buddy, shopping buddy, and most importantly, as my teacher. I will always be grateful that she chose me to be a friend. I love you, Bell. Rest in power.
If I were asked to describe Bell, I would say that she was a spitfire and a dissident. Bell loved small things, small drinking glasses, small ginger ale and Coke cans, small water bottles, small dishes. She admired her own schoolgirl legs. She was flirtatiously young at heart. So the Bell I knew wasn't just a critic, she was a lover. Bell was a gossip, but she was a sweet one. And she was honest, a truth teller, radically and unapologetically so. I think we forget in our rush to popularize her that Bell defined love as an action, a verb, an intention, a possibility, a choice, a care, a community, and accountability. As Bell says, quote, "Love is as love does." The radical self-love that Bell wrote about and practiced and taught me, not just in the classroom, but also in the kitchen and the hallways of her home as she spilled the tea, was an act of transcendence. We cannot receive love or lovingly set the world on fire without loving ourselves first. On the voicemail recording that Bell took with her from home to home in Berea, she sweetly and deliberately says, "All awakening to love is spiritual awakening." Thank you, Bell. I love you.
Bell always encouraged us to critically engage with the world around us, and her work gives us an incredible framework with which to do that. This language that enabled me to attend graduate school, to write a dissertation, to speak at job interviews, carries the scent of oppression. The oppressed struggle in language to recover ourselves. to reconcile, to reunite, to renew. Our words are not without meaning. They are an action, a resistance. Language is also a place of struggle. That struggle, almost 30 years after she's written, actually 30 years after she's written, those prescient words, language continues to be a place of struggle, but it can also be a space of possibility, a space of resistance. She says indeed that our words are a resistance. I hope they've inspired you and encouraged you to think critically about your life, about the world around you, because that's what Bell Hooks would want us to do.
We brought her to the Tucson Festival of Books, and I was able to have a conversation with her. And one of the things I remember so much about that conversation with Bell is how contrary she could be in a really lovely, good way. I had prepared some questions, and she told me to throw away the questions and just have a conversation with her. And any question that I asked that she didn't find interesting, she would just ignore and move on to another topic. It was a really interesting experience and a lot of fun. While she was in Tucson, my mother and my youngest daughter and I and our friend Linda Addison, the horror sci-fi writer, were able to go see with Bell A Wrinkle in Time. And that was a lot of fun too, because we had a chance to hear Bell's cultural analysis in real time. I feel that my own work, particularly my efforts to write in a more accessible way without sacrificing critical analysis, owes a lot to her.
Bell and I met, many, many years ago in the early 1990s at a conference called Show the Right Thing, which followed Spike Lee's very famous film, Do the Right Thing. It was a conference on visual art, film, and criticism. I knew of her, of course, but I'd never met her. And the most amazing thing is that we discovered we were both talking about our grandmothers. So she was talking about her grandmother and visiting her home, and how in the rest of her life, which was more, I think, physically impoverished, in her grandmother's home, she found beauty. And just sitting there listening to that was my first real deep realization how much love played a part in her intellectual life. The irony of it is that she searched for it and rarely found it, but she somehow managed to open the hearts of people all over the world who needed to know that such possibilities of love in face of loss, in face of conflict, was possible. Despite the absence, despite the distance, she is really, for me, one of the great experiences, relationships, and friendships of my life. And I think she's unique because she brought both the heart and the mind to the issues of our contemporary society as a woman, as a feminist, as a Black woman.
Bell didn't allow propriety to dictate what she interrogated. And she had an unflinching ability and commitment to delving into those aspects of Black life, which are frankly just painful and create a lot of psychic distress for Black people. And this didn't come at, this came at a certain cost. I know there was a tendency to underestimate or undervalue the sort of intellectual integrity and intensity even of Bell's project, because she had a willingness to delve into these areas. Love in particular, things like companionship, desire, self-worth, self-valuing. These are the areas that I think she most distinguished herself in. And this is not like a backhanded compliment, but she was just really, really fearless in her willingness and ability and commitment to bringing people along with her in her investigations of these spaces of essentially like psychic trauma for Black folks. She was incredibly gifted at looking at the sort of idiomatic and vernacular ways in which Black people had cared for themselves, their sort of vernacular traditions of self-care, and was able to extend the logic and the sort of genius of those vernacular, traditions of self-care into a public space, into a contemporary space, and into a space in which, Black people were allowed to look in a mirror and look at themselves in a certain way that oftentimes intellectual work, the intellectual work of Black folks, you don't really see. I mean, we know there's a tendency, a lot of our brightest, smartest thinkers can get caught up in some of the sort of jargon of academia and these kinds of things. And Bell just never allowed any of that stuff to obfuscate her primary commitment, which was to, enriching people's lives, figuring out how we got over, figuring out how we could sustain an emancipatory space for ourselves, how we could sustain this in the face of, the horror show that, Black America has been for Black folks.
But the ability to be present to people, to be interested in what students had to say as contributors, real contributors and thinkers, it was just so radical, and it still is so radical. I mean, we think of that, especially at liberal arts colleges now, as the best of teaching, but it's still extraordinary to think of the classroom as this interconnected web of authenticity and give and take. Bell Hooks talks about the classroom as this radical space of possibility.
We need bell hooks now more than ever. We're at a peculiar point in American history. Not only is racial injustice still a recurring and devastating feature of American society, but its continuation continues to happen when the number of Black elites and Black elected officials continue to grow. We seem to have reached a point where the phenomenon of racial representation is offered in place of reparations, racial justice, freedom, and certainly liberation. These challenges have also helped to inspire new movements and protest, but those movements are in desperate need of history, politics, and clarity. Bell Hooks' body of work needs to be mined, extracted from, and in order to train a new generation of radicals in the politics of Black feminism, anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, and radical hope and radical love.
Gloria was an extraordinary gift to feminism. She spoke her truth in a way that challenged us to grow, yet she gave us pathways, words, and ideas and images to help do that. She was a practitioner of intersectionality before the word existed or was popular, because she always spoke from her rich understanding of the diversity and complexity of women's lives. She had a comprehensive way of looking at the world, an inquisitive mind, and read more books than anybody I know. But yet she spoke to people wherever they were, in everyday language.
I got a chance to travel down to Berea with my colleagues and to help Bell sort through her life's items and her ephemera, all the way from her journals and years of papers that she had written by hand to Baby, her beloved doll, which sat in her room, and so many other cherished artifacts. I got a chance to sit with her and sort through them and to transport them to the Bell Hooks Institute as it was forming at Berea College. And she was an affirming and also firm mentor. A primary connection that Bell and I shared was our faith and our following of our faith. And she gave me this book that she had written, All Divine Love, Prayers for Now and for Always. I love that on the side it says that it's by Bad Baby Bell, which is a great way to remember Bell Hooks as the Bad Baby Bell. Prayer is a space of reckless abandonment. We can tell all to a listening God who will not judge. Whenever my faith has been shaken, prayer is my anchor. In conversation with God, I renew my spirit, said Bell.
She touched me. I turned around and she said, "Who are you and what's your story?" I feel very blessed that I had the opportunity to know such a powerful voice in criticism and such a beautiful soul in her home. She died on December 15th. I felt the impact of that conversation coming to an end. And then I realized that I've been talking to her still. And she's still very much in dialogue with me, and for that I will be forever grateful.
The place, rural Kentucky. The character, Gloria, aka Belle's granddaughter, aka baby Bell Hooks. Little Belle wants the church bell to ring when she wants it to. Wake up Grandma and the whole town. Little Belle wants her own bell, like in a movie hotel. Hold it in her hand, ring to summon help. Little Belle touches bluebells, honeysuckle, tulips. None of them make the right sound. Little Belle breaks a kitchen glass trying to get the ring out, spills the jewelry box, in trouble all over again. Little Belle tries everything, big, small, store-bought, homemade. Little Belle tries all day, outside sun, inside shade. Little Belle realizes the call is coming from inside. The sound, glory, glory, the sound will have to be her own voice.
With rigor and grace and passion and perseverance, she provoked us to think about the difficult issues of how to change the world. She also insisted that the most marginalized in our communities be grounded at the center of our work. She was a role model for who and what a radical Black feminist can be inside, on the border of, and outside of the academy. She will continue to inspire us, to provoke us, to teach us. Her legacy is very, very large. We miss her deeply, but she will truly be remembered for the impact that she has had and will continue to have on all of our lives, on our work, and most importantly, on our practice.
We are honored to have both a center and a campus road named for Bell Hooks, who chose our college and our town as her residence and place to continue her lifelong work. Belle, in her great grasp of history, had that strong conviction that feminism was for everyone. She welcomed me as a fellow feminist, and we became friends. She was not shy to point out when my thinking needed one sort of correction or another, and it was always an honor to have her expand my horizons because she was so smart and so fierce. One other conviction of Belle that made her such a true Berean was that love, the impartial love celebrated as well by Berea's founders, was the answer to most of what is wrong in our culture. Belle had many friends, and they all, like me, honored and treasured their relationships with her. Her tent was so very welcoming and capacious. Her tent was full of learning opportunities. She read a book every day and always eagerly shared what she was learning. Again, how could one be more Berean than that? I have always been a reader too, and an eclectic one, so it was reassuring to meet a great intellect like Belle who enjoyed everything from romance literature to theoretical theory. We miss Belle so much, and will always be proud that she chose to associate herself with us, and that she allowed us to put her name on the center, where we celebrate all gender identities, seeing their inclusion as fundamental to the welcoming mission and identity of Berea College.